Pick up the glass and get out. Victor Hayes' voice slammed across the luxury restaurant like a whip. Naomi Brooks stood frozen beside the shattered wine tray, tears running down her face while rich guests stared at her like trash. I said get out. Victor shouted again. The entire restaurant went silent except for nervous whispers and soft laughter from wealthy customers. Naomi bent down quickly, her trembling hands trying to collect broken glass from the marble floor. Her waitress uniform looked old compared to the expensive suits and glittering dresses around her. One customer lifted his phone and started recording. Another woman smirked. These poor girls always bring drama. Naomi lowered her head instantly. Embarrassment crushed her. I am sorry, she whispered. Please. I just need this job. Victor stepped closer. Expensive watch. Perfect suit. Cold eyes. You embarrassed my VIP guests. He pointed toward the door. Girls like you should stay far away from places like this. The room filled with uncomfortable laughter. Naomi's breathing became uneven. She looked exhausted. Broken. Like somebody already carrying too much pain before tonight even started. Then a deep voice suddenly cut through the room. She said she was sorry. Everyone turned. Marcus Cole stood near the entrance in dusty construction clothes, holding his old yellow helmet under one arm. Dirt covered his worn boots. His faded gray jacket looked soaked from rain outside. He clearly did not belong among crystal chandeliers and $1,000 dinners. Some guests immediately laughed harder. A construction worker. This keeps getting worse. Marcus ignored them and walked toward Naomi slowly. Calmly. He crouched beside her and helped pick up the broken glass. Naomi looked shocked. Nobody else had moved to help her. Not one person. Victor's face darkened instantly. Who invited you into this section? Marcus kept his voice quiet. She made a mistake. That does not mean you humiliate her in front of everybody. Victor laughed coldly. People like you always defend failure. The words hit hard. Naomi's eyes filled again. Marcus noticed her hands shaking badly while she tried hiding something beneath her sleeve. A silver chain. Small. Elegant. Completely out of place against her cheap uniform. For 1 second the pendant slipped free beneath the restaurant lights. Marcus noticed an engraved symbol on it before Naomi quickly covered it again. Strange. Expensive. Important somehow. Victor suddenly kicked the broken tray aside violently enough to make Naomi flinch. Security. 2 guards immediately started walking forward. Throw them both out. Naomi panicked instantly. No, please. Her voice cracked. Please do not fire me. She grabbed Victor's sleeve desperately. My rent is overdue. I cannot lose this job. Victor pulled his arm away like she disgusted him. Then maybe you should have learned how to behave. Marcus stood up slowly between them. Enough. Silence dropped across the restaurant again. The tension changed. Even Naomi looked scared now. Marcus was poor. Tired. Outnumbered. But there was something steady in his eyes. Something proud. Victor smirked. You think you are a hero? Marcus answered quietly. No. I just know what it feels like when people with money think they can crush somebody weaker. Several guests exchanged awkward looks. One older waitress near the kitchen looked like she wanted to defend Naomi too. For one tiny moment, hope appeared. Then Victor raised his voice again. Anybody defending these two can leave with them. The older waitress immediately looked down and stepped back. Phones lifted higher. Nobody wanted trouble with Victor Hayes. Naomi's tears fell harder now. Marcus, she whispered softly after noticing his work badge. You should go. But Marcus stayed exactly where he was. Rain hammered the restaurant windows outside while rich customers watched like it was entertainment. Victor pointed toward the door again. "Take your poor little savior and leave." One man near the bar laughed loudly. "Maybe he thinks crying waitresses fall in love with construction workers." More laughter exploded around the room. Naomi covered her face in humiliation. Marcus clenched his jaw but stayed calm. "You do not know anything about her." Victor stepped closer until they stood face to face. "And you do not know who you are protecting." That sentence lingered strangely in the air. Naomi looked terrified after hearing it. Truly terrified. Marcus noticed it immediately. Then suddenly Naomi's silver chain slipped loose again during the confrontation and fell onto the marble floor. The pendant opened slightly on impact. Inside was part of an old photograph. A little girl standing beside a luxury black SUV. Before Marcus could look closer, Naomi quickly grabbed it back with shaking hands. Fear flashed across her face. Not embarrassment. Fear. Victor saw it too. His expression changed instantly. Just for a second. Then the sound of engines echoed outside the restaurant. Deep. Expensive. Powerful. Headlights swept across the front windows. One by one, 5 black SUVs slowly pulled up to the entrance of the restaurant. The entire room went silent. Even Victor stopped talking. Security guards straightened immediately. Rich guests turned toward the doors nervously. Marcus looked outside through the rain-covered glass while Naomi's face lost all color. Then one SUV door slowly opened, and a tall black man in a dark tailored coat stepped out into the rain with quiet authority in his eyes. The tall black man stepped out of the SUV slowly while rain poured across the restaurant entrance. His dark tailored coat barely moved in the wind. Quiet authority surrounded him instantly. Security guards straightened their backs. Rich guests lowered their phones. Even Victor Hayes looked nervous for the first time that night. Marcus Cole stood beside Naomi, confused and soaked in construction dust and rainwater while the expensive restaurant lights reflected across the marble floor between them. Naomi's breathing became uneven the second she saw the man. Real fear. Not embarrassment anymore. Fear. The man's sharp eyes moved across the room carefully. First Victor. Then the shattered glass. Then Naomi. Finally Marcus. He noticed Marcus still standing protectively beside her. "Miss Brooks," the man said calmly. The entire room froze. Naomi immediately lowered her eyes. "Elijah," she whispered weakly. Marcus noticed the name instantly. Elijah Brooks. The same last name engraved faintly on the silver chain Naomi kept trying to hide. Victor forced an uncomfortable smile. "Mr. Brooks, this situation is under control." Elijah did not even look at him. "Does she look safe to you?" Silence crushed the restaurant again. Naomi's hands shook harder around the silver pendant. Marcus looked between them, confused. Wealth. Expensive SUVs. Private security. Rich guests suddenly acting nervous around one quiet man. Something about Naomi did not fit the poor waitress uniform anymore. Elijah stepped closer slowly. "Naomi." His voice stayed calm. "Why did you disappear again?" Victor interrupted immediately. "She stole from the restaurant." Naomi's head snapped up instantly. "That is not true." Her voice cracked from panic and humiliation. Victor pointed toward her violently. "Then explain why you were hiding in a cheap diner job under a fake name." Guests immediately started whispering again. "Fake name? Who is she?" "This girl lied to everybody." Marcus looked at Naomi carefully. She looked trapped. Cornered. Exhausted. Not dangerous. Elijah noticed Marcus studying her. "You helped her," he asked quietly. Marcus nodded once. She was crying. Victor laughed sharply. Of course the construction worker wants to play hero. He looked toward Elijah again. People like him always smell opportunity. The insult landed hard. Marcus lowered his eyes briefly. Dirt still covered his old work jacket. His boots left muddy marks across the luxury floor while wealthy customers stared at him with disgust. Naomi suddenly stepped forward despite trembling badly. He did nothing wrong. Victor snapped instantly. Be quiet. Naomi flinched hard at the tone. Elijah noticed it immediately. A strange silence followed. Small details started shifting in his mind. Naomi terrified of Victor. The hidden chain. The fake name accusation. The way she protected Marcus instead of herself. Then Elijah's eyes narrowed slightly after noticing something else. A faded scar near Naomi's wrist. His expression changed for half a second. Tiny. Controlled. But Marcus saw it. Elijah quietly asked, "Where did you get that scar?" Naomi froze completely. Victor answered too quickly. Kitchen accident. Elijah finally turned toward Victor fully now. Calm. Sharp. Dangerous in a different way. I did not ask you. Emotional silence spread through the restaurant again. Naomi looked like she wanted to speak. For one tiny moment, hope appeared. Then Victor stepped between them aggressively. Miss Brooks is overwhelmed. She needs privacy. He motioned security closer. Remove the construction worker. Two guards immediately grabbed Marcus by the arms. Naomi panicked. No. Marcus tried pulling away calmly. I did nothing. One wealthy customer laughed softly. Poor men always become problems. Another lifted a phone again. Marcus felt humiliation burning through him while rich strangers judged him without knowing anything about his life. His mother was home alone sick. His final paycheck barely covered medicine already. And now security treated him like trash because he defended somebody crying. Naomi suddenly grabbed Elijah's sleeve desperately. Please, tears streamed down her face again. Do not let them hurt him. Elijah looked down at her hand gripping his coat. Then slowly toward Marcus being dragged backward. Tiny hope flickered again. Wait, Elijah said quietly. The guards stopped instantly. Victor's jaw tightened. Elijah walked toward Marcus slowly. Expensive shoes crossing muddy floor stains left by Marcus's boots. Total class contrast. Rich power standing inches away from exhausted poverty. What is your name? Elijah asked. Marcus Cole. Elijah studied him carefully. Why help somebody you do not know? Marcus answered without hesitation. Because nobody else would. That answer hit the room harder than shouting. Even Naomi stared at him silently. If you were standing in that restaurant, would you believe the rich manager or the poor construction worker risking everything for somebody crying alone? But before the silence could shift further, Victor interrupted again. This is manipulation. He pulled a document from his pocket suddenly. We found stolen employee records missing after her shift. Naomi's face lost color instantly. No, she whispered. I did not take anything. Victor held up the folder dramatically toward Elijah. She lied about her identity from the beginning. Another obstacle. Another humiliation. Marcus looked toward Naomi again. She seemed seconds away from collapsing. Then suddenly one of Elijah's assistants rushed through the entrance holding a tablet nervously. Sir, he whispered urgently. You need to see this security footage. Elijah looked down at the screen. His expression changed immediately. Victor noticed it too. Panic flashed across his face for one dangerous second. Elijah slowly lifted his eyes toward Naomi. What exactly happened to you 3 years ago? The entire restaurant went silent. Naomi's hand started trembling violently around the silver chain. Then her phone suddenly rang. She looked at the screen, and nearly dropped it after reading the caller ID, Mama Lorraine. Naomi stared at the phone screen like she had seen a ghost. Mama Lorraine glowed across the cracked display while rain hammered the restaurant windows behind her. Marcus immediately stepped closer. Why does my mother have your number? Naomi looked terrified now. Truly cornered. Elijah Brooks noticed everything silently. The shaking hands. The hidden chain. The panic in her eyes. Victor Hayes noticed it too. Answer the phone, Victor snapped. Naomi hesitated before finally pressing accept. Mama Lorraine's weak voice immediately filled the line through the restaurant silence. Marcus, she coughed painfully. The landlord came again. Marcus's face changed instantly. All tension about Naomi disappeared for 1 second. Only fear for his mother remained. Mama, are you okay? Another painful cough. I told him we need 2 more days. Her voice cracked softly. But he locked the water again. Emotional silence spread through Marcus immediately. The rich restaurant around him suddenly felt even colder. Crystal chandeliers. Expensive wine. Perfect suits. And somewhere across town, his sick mother sat alone in darkness without water. Victor folded his arms with disgust. This is exactly why poor people should stay out of wealthy spaces. Naomi looked furious for the first time. Stop talking about him like that. Victor stepped closer. Then explain why his mother suddenly knows your number. Naomi froze again. Elijah quietly extended his hand. May I? Naomi slowly gave him the phone. Elijah spoke calmly into it. Mrs. Lorraine. This is Elijah Brooks. Silence answered him for a second. Then Mama Lorraine whispered nervously, Sir. Marcus did not steal anything. That line hit hard. Even Elijah paused slightly. Marcus lowered his head in shame. His mother's first instinct was protecting him from accusations. Not asking for help. Not complaining. Protecting him. Elijah's expression softened almost invisibly. Your son helped someone tonight, he said quietly. He is not in trouble. Mama Lorraine began crying softly on the phone. He is all I have. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Pain moved across his face like exhaustion he no longer knew how to hide. He worked 12 hours carrying concrete every day. Skipped meals. Delayed medicine. Smiled through humiliation. All just to keep his mother alive 1 more month. Elijah slowly handed the phone back. Go home to your mother, he told Marcus calmly. Tiny hope appeared again. But Victor immediately crushed it. Actually, he cannot. Victor pulled another paper from the folder. I already called his construction supervisor. Marcus looked up sharply. Victor smirked. Workers who threaten VIP guests become liabilities. Marcus understood instantly. His stomach dropped. You fired me. Victor shrugged coldly. Actions have consequences. Naomi stepped forward desperately. This is my fault. Victor cut her off instantly. No. This is what happens when poor people forget their place. The restaurant fell silent again. Marcus felt every eye on him. Dirty boots. Empty pockets. No paycheck coming. A sick mother waiting in darkness. Elijah studied Victor carefully now. Quiet suspicion growing deeper behind controlled eyes. Then his assistant leaned close and whispered something while showing him the tablet again. Elijah's eyes narrowed slightly. The security footage replayed silently on the screen. Naomi crying before the accident. Victor grabbing her wrist aggressively near the kitchen hallway. Naomi hiding the silver chain afterward. Something about the timeline did not match Victor's story at all. Elijah finally asked softly, why was restaurant camera 3 turned off for 11 minutes tonight? Victor answered too quickly. Technical problem. Elijah looked unconvinced. Marcus noticed it immediately. Tiny hope again. Then another obstacle crashed down. Marcus's phone buzzed violently. He checked it and froze. Final notice. Eviction process begins tomorrow morning. His landlord attached a photo of Mama Lorraine sitting alone outside the apartment building wrapped in a blanket. Rainwater pooled near her feet. Marcus immediately grabbed his helmet. I need to go. Naomi looked devastated. Marcus, but he was already walking toward the door. Humiliated again. Broke again. Losing everything again. Elijah watched him carefully while wealthy guests stepped aside to avoid touching his muddy clothes. If kindness alone could save people, why did the kindest man in the room keep suffering the most? Outside, cold rain slammed across Marcus's face as he hurried down the street toward the bus stop. The 5 black SUVs remained parked outside glowing under streetlights like another world completely separate from his own. Then Naomi suddenly ran after him into the rain. Wait. Marcus turned. Naomi shoved folded cash into his hand desperately. For your mother. Marcus immediately tried giving it back. No, Naomi's eyes filled with tears again. Please. Let me help this time. Before Marcus could answer, one of Elijah's assistants stepped outside holding an old photograph under a protective folder. He looked directly at Elijah near the doorway. Sir, he whispered urgently. You need to see this. Elijah stared at the faded picture carefully. A little black girl wearing the exact silver chain stood beside a smiling woman, and behind them, barely visible near the edge of the photo, stood a younger Victor Hayes. Rainwater dripped from the old photograph while Elijah Brooks stared at the faded image under the restaurant lights. Naomi stood frozen beside Marcus near the entrance, her breathing uneven. The little girl in the picture wore the exact silver chain now hidden beneath Naomi's waitress uniform. And behind her, younger but unmistakable, stood Victor Hayes. Elijah slowly lifted his eyes toward Victor. Why were you in this photo? Victor's expression hardened instantly. I do not remember every employee my family worked with 20 years ago. Elijah did not answer immediately. Silence stretched across the luxury restaurant while wealthy guests pretended not to listen. Marcus watched everything carefully despite exhaustion weighing on his face. Something deeper was happening here. Something dangerous. Elijah handed the photo to his assistant quietly. Run facial confirmation on the child. Victor interrupted sharply. This is ridiculous. Elijah's calm voice cut through him instantly. Then you should not be nervous. Emotional silence again. Naomi clutched her silver chain tightly like it was the only thing holding her together. Elijah noticed her trembling hands. Who gave you that necklace? Naomi looked terrified after the question. My mother. Where is she now? Naomi swallowed hard. Dead. Victor immediately stepped forward. Enough. Too fast. Too aggressive. Elijah noticed it again. Every time the necklace or photo appeared, Victor panicked. Tiny details. Tiny cracks. Elijah's suspicion deepened quietly. Outside, rain still covered Marcus's old work jacket while rich guests slowly returned to their expensive tables pretending the scene was entertainment instead of somebody's life collapsing in public. Marcus looked toward Naomi carefully. She looked exhausted beyond humiliation now. Like somebody carrying years of fear alone. Then Elijah's assistant returned holding a tablet. Sir, he whispered. The security footage from tonight was partially erased. Victor answered instantly. Technical failure. The assistant hesitated. Only camera 3 was edited. Silence hit again. Marcus looked toward Victor slowly. Naomi lowered her eyes immediately, like she already knew this kind of manipulation too well. Elijah walked toward the private office hallway without raising his voice. "Bring me the full employee records." Victor followed quickly beside him. "Elijah, you are overreacting over a waitress." Elijah stopped walking. "No," his eyes moved briefly toward Naomi. "I think everybody else has been underreacting for years." That line left Victor visibly shaken for the first time. Meanwhile, Marcus and Naomi stood alone near the entrance. Rich customers whispered around them like vultures. "She lied about her identity. That construction worker will regret this. Poor people always hide something." Naomi's eyes filled again. Marcus quietly removed his work gloves. Rough hands. Cracked skin. Exhaustion everywhere. Yet his voice stayed gentle. "You do not have to explain anything tonight." Naomi looked at him in disbelief. "Why are you still kind to me?" Marcus gave a tired smile. "Because somebody should be." For one tiny moment, Naomi almost looked safe. Then her phone buzzed again. Hospital alert. Payment overdue. Treatment suspended in 24 hours. Her face lost color instantly. Marcus noticed it immediately. "Who is sick?" Naomi hesitated before whispering, "My little brother." Another emotional weight. Another reason she kept enduring humiliation silently. Elijah's assistant suddenly approached Naomi carefully. "Miss Brooks." Naomi flinched hard hearing that name again. "There is no Brooks," she whispered. "Not anymore." The assistant lowered his voice. "Mr. Brooks wants to ask about your mother." Naomi panicked instantly. "No," she stepped backward. "I cannot." Marcus noticed real fear again. Not shame. Fear of something old returning. Tiny hope appeared when Elijah himself stepped back into the hallway carrying another file. "Naomi," he said quietly. "I think somebody erased part of your past." The room went silent again. Even Victor stopped moving for half a second. Elijah slowly opened the old employee file. Inside sat a hospital record from 20 years ago. One page missing. One name blacked out. One signature still visible at the bottom. Victor Hayes. Elijah's expression darkened quietly. "Why were you at St. Mercy Hospital the night this child disappeared?" Victor's jaw tightened instantly. Naomi looked completely lost now. Marcus stepped closer beside her protectively again. Then suddenly the restaurant television screens flickered alive after the assistant restored part of the deleted footage. Grainy black and white video appeared from tonight's kitchen hallway. Naomi crying alone. Victor grabbing her wrist aggressively. And just before the footage cut out, Victor staring directly at the silver necklace with pure panic in his eyes. The entire restaurant fell silent. Victor immediately reached for his phone and turned away from everybody. His whisper was low. "Urgent. Dangerous. Find out where the girl lives," he muttered. "And make sure nobody sees what else she is hiding." Victor Hayes lowered his phone slowly after the secret call, but the tension around him had already changed. Elijah Brooks saw it clearly now. Fear. Small. Controlled. But real. Naomi stood near the restaurant entrance clutching her silver chain while Marcus remained beside her in soaked construction clothes. Rich guests kept whispering behind crystal glasses like they were watching poor people destroy themselves for entertainment. Elijah's assistant replayed the damaged security footage again on the tablet. Naomi crying. Victor grabbing her wrist. Then static. Missing minutes. Missing truth. Elijah spoke quietly. "Why was the footage edited after the incident?" Victor laughed coldly. "You are accusing me over a waitress." Elijah's eyes stayed calm. I am asking why somebody panicked enough to erase evidence. Silence spread fast again. Naomi looked like she wanted to disappear completely. Marcus noticed her hands trembling harder every second. Then Victor suddenly changed tactics. Dangerous. Smarter. Actually, he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, maybe we should discuss why Naomi Brooks keeps using fake identities. Guests immediately turned again. Phones lifted. Whispers returned stronger. Fake identity. She lied. Maybe Victor was right all along. Naomi stepped backward instantly. Please, Victor pulled several copied documents from the folder dramatically. Employment records. Different last names. Missing background history. He looked directly at Elijah. She manipulated everybody. Marcus frowned immediately. Or somebody erased her past. Victor ignored him completely. And now she suddenly appears near the Brooks family again after disappearing for years. Naomi's eyes filled with panic. I never wanted any of this. Victor pointed toward her violently. Then tell everybody why you hid your real name. Naomi opened her mouth, then stopped. Fear crushed the words before they escaped. Emotional silence swallowed the restaurant again. Victor saw weakness and attacked harder. Exactly. He turned toward the crowd. She cannot answer because she is lying. Another humiliation crashed down harder than before. Rich guests openly stared now. One woman whispered loudly, poor girls always invent stories around rich families. Another customer filmed Naomi crying again. Marcus stepped protectively closer beside her. Leave her alone. Victor smirked coldly. Construction workers defending liars. Very touching. The insult burned again. Marcus's empty wallet. His eviction notice. His sick mother waiting alone. Everything made him look powerless in this luxury world. Elijah noticed Marcus clenching his jaw silently instead of fighting back. Dignity under humiliation. Tiny hope appeared when Elijah calmly took one document from Victor's hand. He studied it quietly. Then his expression shifted slightly. This hospital form was altered. Victor froze for half a second. Elijah tapped the page. Different ink. Different timestamp. Naomi looked shocked. Marcus looked toward Elijah instantly. Tiny hope again. Then obstacle. Victor immediately raised his voice toward the crowd. Now you are forging conspiracy theories because your family feels guilty. He pointed toward Naomi again. Ask her why she disappeared after St. Mercy Hospital burned down. Naomi's face lost all color. Elijah noticed immediately. What happened at St. Mercy? Naomi shook her head violently. I cannot, Victor interrupted instantly. Because she knows the truth would destroy her. Emotional pressure exploded around her again. Wealthy guests whispered harder. Security guards slowly blocked the exits now. Naomi looked trapped from every direction. Marcus quietly whispered beside her, breathe. She nodded weakly while holding the silver chain tighter beneath her uniform collar. Then suddenly a small voice interrupted from nearby. That necklace belongs to the lady in the picture. Everybody turned. A little busboy stood near the kitchen holding an old cleaning rag nervously. He pointed toward Naomi. I saw the same necklace in the manager's office before. Victor snapped instantly. Go back to work. The child flinched hard. Fear everywhere again. But Elijah noticed something important. Why would Naomi's necklace be in your office? Victor answered too fast. It was found years ago. Naomi's eyes widened instantly. Years ago? Her voice cracked completely now. My mother said it was stolen. Silence. Sharp. Dangerous silence. Victor realized his mistake immediately. Tiny crack. Tiny exposure. Elijah slowly looked toward him. You knew this necklace before tonight. Victor tried recovering instantly. I said it looked familiar. But Elijah no longer seemed convinced. Another obstacle arrived immediately after. One of Victor's lawyers entered the restaurant carrying papers. Miss Naomi Brooks, he announced loudly, you are formally banned from Brooks Family Properties pending investigation into fraudulent identity claims. Public humiliation again. Guests openly stared. Naomi looked shattered. Marcus stepped in front of her immediately. She has nowhere to go. Victor answered coldly, that is not our problem. Then Naomi's phone buzzed again. Hospital alert. Final warning. Treatment cancelled for Jeremiah Brooks. Her little brother. Naomi nearly collapsed after reading it. Marcus caught her arm quickly. Elijah watched everything carefully now. The tears. The fake documents. The edited footage. The necklace Victor clearly recognized. Too many pieces no longer fit together. Then Elijah's assistant suddenly rushed back holding another file pulled from old storage archives. Sir, he whispered urgently, this original hospital intake form was hidden behind the altered records. Elijah opened it slowly. Naomi's hands began shaking violently again. At the top of the document, under Emergency Guardian Information, one name appeared clearly for the first time, Naomi Elijah Brooks. The restaurant fell completely silent after Elijah Brooks opened the hospital record and read the name aloud. Naomi Elijah Brooks. Naomi looked like the ground disappeared beneath her feet. Marcus stared at her in shock while Victor Hayes immediately stepped forward. That document is fake. Too fast. Too desperate. Elijah slowly lifted his eyes toward him. You said you did not remember her. Victor's jaw tightened instantly. Naomi's hands trembled violently around the silver chain hidden beneath her collar. I do not understand, she whispered. Elijah carefully studied the old intake form again. This record came from St. Mercy Hospital the night a child disappeared after a fire. The room turned cold. Wealthy guests stopped whispering. Even the restaurant staff froze completely now. Elijah pointed toward the Guardian signature line. My name is listed here. Naomi looked horrified. No, Victor interrupted sharply. Anybody could forge old paperwork. Elijah ignored him completely. Assistant. Pull the emergency archive images from that night. Tiny hope flickered again. Marcus noticed Elijah was no longer treating Naomi like a random waitress. Something deeper had shifted. Then the first real evidence arrived. Elijah's assistant connected the recovered hospital archive to the restaurant television screens. Grainy old footage appeared slowly. Smoke. Hospital hallway. Nurses running. Then one frame froze the entire room. A frightened little black girl wearing the exact silver necklace stood beside a woman holding her hand. Naomi covered her mouth instantly. The woman beside the child looked exactly like her mother from the old photograph. Emotional silence crashed across the restaurant. One wealthy guest whispered softly, that is her. Victor immediately raised his voice. Coincidence. But his voice cracked slightly this time. Elijah stepped closer to the screen. Zoom in. The image sharpened slowly. Behind the woman and child stood Victor Hayes speaking aggressively to hospital security near a restricted hallway. Marcus looked toward Victor immediately. Naomi's breathing became uneven again. Why were you there? Elijah asked quietly. Victor answered too quickly again. My father donated to the hospital. Elijah's eyes narrowed. At 2 a.m. during a fire. Tiny hope grew stronger now. The rich guests who mocked Naomi earlier suddenly looked uncertain. Phones lowered slowly. Then another emotional spike hit. Elijah's assistant pulled up one more recovered frame. The child's hospital bracelet. Name, Naomi Brooks. Age, 6, emergency status, relocation pending. The room went completely silent. Naomi began crying softly. Not loud. Just years of fear finally cracking open. Marcus stepped beside her immediately. Protective again without hesitation. Elijah noticed that too. Who changed her records? Elijah asked quietly. Nobody answered. Victor suddenly laughed nervously. You are building fairy tales from damaged footage. Then the little busboy from earlier spoke again carefully from near the kitchen. Sir. I remember something else. Victor snapped instantly. Enough. The child flinched hard but continued anyway. Mr. Hayes told somebody to hide a necklace years ago. Silence exploded again. Victor's face darkened instantly. Elijah slowly held out his hand toward Naomi. The chain. Naomi hesitated. Fear everywhere in her eyes. But after a long moment, she finally placed the silver necklace into Elijah's palm. Elijah opened the pendant carefully for the first time. Inside rested a folded piece of paper hidden beneath the photograph. Tiny. Old. Protected for years. The room held its breath while Elijah unfolded it carefully. Written inside was one sentence in faded ink: if anything happens to me, take Naomi to Elijah Brooks. The entire restaurant froze. If you were watching this moment, what would you believe now? Who spent years hiding a child connected to one of the wealthiest families in the city? But before answers could come, obstacle arrived again. Elijah's assistant suddenly whispered urgently into his ear. Sir, part of the hospital archive is still missing. Somebody deleted the relocation records completely. Victor immediately seized the moment. Exactly. There is no proof she belongs to your family. Naomi lowered her eyes instantly again. Tiny hope crushed halfway. Marcus noticed her shoulders shaking. Elijah carefully folded the hidden note back into the necklace instead of revealing more publicly. Quiet authority. Controlled emotion. But his hands trembled slightly for the first time. Why did this affect him so deeply? Then another emotional shock hit. Naomi's phone rang again. Hospital emergency line. She answered instantly. A frightened nurse spoke through the speaker. Miss Brooks, your brother Jeremiah collapsed after treatment was suspended. You need to come now. Naomi nearly fell apart. Marcus caught her immediately again. Elijah looked toward his assistant sharply. Get the car ready. Victor noticed the shift instantly. Danger growing closer. Then Elijah turned slowly toward Naomi and closed his hand tightly around the silver necklace. Nobody touches this evidence now, he said calmly. Victor's face lost color for half a second. And at that exact moment, Elijah's assistant replayed one final recovered frame from the old hospital camera. In the background near the restricted exit door stood Victor Hayes, holding a small child wrapped in a hospital blanket. Elijah Brooks stared at the frozen hospital frame one last time before the screen went dark. Victor Hayes holding a child near the restricted exit. Naomi's necklace hidden for years. Jeremiah collapsing in the hospital. Everything felt connected now, but the truth was still trapped behind missing pieces. Get the car, Elijah ordered quietly again. Victor stepped forward immediately. You are making a mistake over an old camera glitch. Elijah did not even look at him this time. Enough. The single word cut through the restaurant like cold steel. Naomi stood frozen beside Marcus, still shaking. Years of humiliation made kindness feel dangerous now. She looked at Elijah carefully, uncertain whether to trust him or run from him. Then Elijah did something small. Human. He removed his expensive coat and placed it gently over Naomi's shoulders after noticing her trembling hands. He did not touch her directly. He stopped inches away first, giving her space. That tiny hesitation said more than words. Naomi lowered her eyes instantly. "You do not owe me anything," she whispered painfully. Elijah looked at her for a long second. "Maybe I do." Silence hit hard again. Victor noticed it too. Jealous fear flashed across his face immediately. Outside the restaurant, black SUVs waited beneath the rain while wealthy guests whispered behind the glass walls. Rich people watched like spectators. Naomi looked smaller than ever beside them. Old shoes. Wet uniform. Exhausted eyes. But Elijah stayed beside her anyway. Tiny rescue. Tiny dignity. Marcus quietly handed Naomi her cracked phone from the floor. "Jeremiah needs you now." Naomi nodded quickly and tried to walk away alone again. But restaurant security suddenly blocked the exit after Victor gave a subtle signal. "Management still has questions about the stolen bracelet accusation." Naomi's face fell instantly. Another humiliation ready to begin. "I did not steal anything," she said softly. Victor folded his arms calmly. "Then why were you hiding family jewelry?" Elijah's voice turned colder now. "Move." The guards hesitated. Nobody had spoken to them like that before. "Sir," one guard started nervously. Elijah stepped closer. "Quiet authority. I said move." The guards immediately stepped aside. Emotional silence spread across the entrance. Naomi looked shocked. Nobody had protected her publicly before. Not once. As they walked toward the SUVs, Jeremiah called weakly through Naomi's phone speaker from the hospital bed. "Naomi, do not lose the necklace." Elijah heard every word. Naomi panicked and lowered the phone instantly. Too late. Elijah's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your brother knows about it too." Naomi swallowed hard. "My mother told us never to let anybody take it." "Why?" Elijah asked softly. Naomi's voice almost broke. "She said somebody powerful wanted us erased." That sentence hit Elijah deeply. His expression changed for half a second before control returned again. Inside the SUV, rich leather seats surrounded Naomi like another world entirely. Rain slid across the tinted windows while she clutched her torn bag tightly against her chest. Elijah sat across from her silently holding the silver necklace carefully in his hand like something sacred. Not evidence anymore. Something personal. "You are afraid of me," he finally said quietly. Naomi looked out the window. "People with power usually hurt people like me." Elijah did not answer immediately. That silence felt heavier than any speech. Then he asked softly, "What was your mother's name?" Naomi hesitated. "Angela Brooks." Elijah froze completely. Tiny emotional shock. Marcus noticed it instantly from the front seat mirror. Elijah slowly leaned back like the air had disappeared from the car. Angela Brooks. A name buried for decades. A woman connected to a fire nobody in his family discussed anymore. Tiny hope appeared again. Maybe Naomi was not lying. Maybe somebody destroyed her life on purpose. But obstacle arrived immediately after. Elijah's phone rang. His older sister Vanessa Brooks. Cold voice. "Do not bring that girl near this family." Elijah's expression hardened instantly. "You already know about her." Silence on the other line. Then Vanessa answered carefully. "Some secrets destroy families." The call ended abruptly. Naomi noticed the shift immediately. Fear returned to her face. "I knew this would happen," she whispered painfully. "People always regret helping me." Elijah looked toward her again. This time softer. "Not yet." Tiny emotional bond formed quietly there inside the rain-covered SUV. Not romance. Not rescue. Just two wounded people standing near a truth bigger than both of them. Then another emotional spike hit. Elijah's assistant called urgently from the hospital archive office. "Sir, we found another photo from the fire." Elijah immediately opened the message on his phone. The old image slowly loaded on the screen. Angela Brooks holding young Naomi near the emergency exit. And standing beside them, was Elijah himself as a teenager. Naomi stared at the image in complete shock. "Why were you there?" she whispered. Elijah looked at the photo like he had seen a ghost. Then, almost unconsciously, he repeated the exact same sentence Angela once told him years ago. "Protect her until I come back." Naomi's eyes widened instantly. "My mother used to say those exact words every night." The SUV fell completely silent. And far behind them, inside the restaurant window, Victor Hayes watched the convoy leave while realizing the final evidence was getting dangerously close. The old photograph trembled slightly in Elijah Brooks' hand inside the moving SUV. Rain hit the windows softly while Naomi stared at the faded image like it might suddenly disappear. Young Elijah stood beside Angela Brooks near the burned apartment building. And around Angela's neck was the exact same silver necklace Naomi carried her whole life. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Heavy silence. Painful silence. Then Elijah finally whispered, almost to himself, "I thought they both died that night." Naomi looked at him instantly. "What night?" Elijah did not answer immediately. His jaw tightened hard. Old memories were opening now. Dangerous ones. Marcus quietly pulled the SUV into the underground parking level of Brooks Memorial Hospital while security guards cleared the entrance. Wealth and power surrounded them again. Marble walls. Bright lights. Black suits. Expensive silence. Naomi suddenly looked even smaller walking beside Elijah with her worn shoes and tired face. But Elijah stayed close anyway. Not touching her. Protecting the space around her. Inside Jeremiah's hospital room, Naomi's sick mother Denise suddenly sat upright after seeing Elijah enter. Fear covered her face immediately. "No," she whispered weakly. "Not him." Naomi rushed to her bedside. "Mama, do you know him?" Denise's breathing became uneven. Her shaking hand pointed directly toward the necklace. "Angela told me never to let the Brooks family find that child." Elijah froze completely. Marcus slowly lowered the hospital file he was holding. Emotional shock filled the room instantly. Naomi stepped back in confusion. "What child?" Denise looked toward Naomi with tears in her eyes. "You." Silence crashed into the room again. Elijah slowly sat down beside the hospital bed, still controlled but visibly shaken now. "Angela worked for my father 20 years ago," he said carefully. "Then one night there was a fire at the old Brooks property. After that, she disappeared." Denise closed her eyes painfully. "Because somebody wanted her gone." Another sharp silence. Naomi looked between both of them helplessly. Her whole life suddenly felt unfamiliar. "My mother never told me any of this." Denise's voice cracked badly. "She was protecting you." Tiny hope appeared for the first time. Naomi was not crazy. She was not a liar. There really was a hidden truth behind her ruined life. But obstacle arrived immediately after. Victor Hayes entered the hospital hallway outside with 2 lawyers beside him. Naomi saw him through the glass first. Fear instantly returned to her face. "He followed us." Victor walked inside calmly like he still controlled everything. "Mr. Brooks, this woman is manipulating your emotions using old stories." Elijah looked up slowly now. Cold eyes. Dangerous calm. "Why are you afraid of old stories, Victor?" Victor forced a smile, but his hands tightened. "Because desperate people invent lies." Denise suddenly started coughing violently. Nurses rushed in. Machines beeped loudly. Emotional panic filled the room. Naomi held her mother's hand desperately. "Mama, please." Denise grabbed Naomi's wrist tightly before whispering something broken and terrified. "The letter." They took the second letter. Elijah leaned closer instantly. "What letter?" Denise tried to answer but another coughing fit stopped her. Victor immediately interrupted. "She is confused." Elijah's eyes snapped toward him sharply. "You speak every time truth gets close." Victor stayed silent for once. That silence itself felt suspicious now. Marcus quietly handed Elijah another recovered archive file from Brooks' family storage. Old paper. Burn marks. Missing signatures. Elijah opened it carefully. Inside was part of Angela's employment record. But one page had clearly been ripped out years ago. Naomi noticed a handwritten note at the bottom instantly. "Protected by E.B." Her voice trembled. "Those are your initials." Elijah stared at the note like it punched the air from his chest. A memory hit him suddenly. Young Angela crying beside the mansion gate. A baby wrapped in blankets. His father shouting. Someone ordering security to remove her. And Elijah himself promising secretly, "I will help you." Past wound fully opening now. But still incomplete. Still dangerous. Tiny hope grew stronger when Marcus quietly confirmed another detail. "Sir, the hospital archive confirms Naomi's birth records were altered." Naomi covered her mouth instantly. Tears filled her eyes. "Why would somebody erase my name?" Nobody answered immediately. Because everybody in the room already feared the same truth. Then obstacle struck harder. Vanessa Brooks suddenly arrived outside the hospital room with family attorneys behind her. Elegant. Cold. Powerful. She looked directly at Naomi with open disgust. "This investigation ends tonight." Elijah slowly stood between Vanessa and Naomi without hesitation. Family against family now. Denise began trembling violently again after seeing Vanessa. "Do not trust her," she whispered weakly toward Naomi. "She was there that night." Complete silence. Even Victor looked shaken hearing those words. Vanessa's expression changed for only half a second before control returned. But Elijah noticed it. So did Marcus. Then Marcus quietly handed Elijah another recovered photograph from the burned property. This time the missing face had finally been restored. Naomi stared at the image in horror. Standing beside Angela on the night of the fire, was Vanessa Brooks herself. Naomi's entire body froze as the restored photograph slipped from Marcus's hand onto the hospital bed. Vanessa Brooks standing beside Angela on the night of the fire. No more shadows. No more missing face. Denise started crying weakly the moment Naomi picked up the picture. "I told Angela they would never let the truth survive," she whispered painfully. Vanessa immediately stepped forward and grabbed the edge of the hospital curtain shut. "This conversation ends now." Her voice stayed elegant. Controlled. But fear cracked underneath it now. Elijah watched her carefully. "Why were you there that night?" Vanessa crossed her arms slowly. "Because Father asked me to help remove staff from the property after the fire." "Then why hide the records?" Elijah asked immediately. Vanessa did not answer. That silence said too much. Emotional pressure exploded inside the room. Naomi looked completely overwhelmed now. The necklace. The fire. Her mother. The erased records. She could barely breathe anymore. But the real trap had already started moving. 20 minutes later, Brooks' family attorneys requested an emergency private meeting at the mansion. Elijah refused at first. Then Marcus received a message from hospital administration. Jeremiah's treatment account had suddenly been frozen again. Naomi looked terrified instantly. "Please, my brother needs medicine tonight." Vanessa calmly adjusted her gloves. Then come to the mansion and settle this misunderstanding properly. Elijah immediately looked suspicious. You are forcing her there. Vanessa smiled faintly. Or perhaps she wants answers. Tiny hope mixed with danger now. Naomi finally agreed because Jeremiah had no time left. The Brooks mansion looked colder than ever that night. Giant gates. Black cars. Wealth everywhere. Naomi walked through the marble hallway wearing borrowed hospital clothes while rich relatives stared openly at her like she carried disease. Phones quietly recorded from corners. Servants whispered. Old money choosing sides already. Victor Hayes stood beside Vanessa now. United again. Trap fully prepared. Then the humiliation began. Vanessa placed a folder onto the dining table in front of the entire Brooks family council. This woman has manipulated our family using stolen documents and emotional lies. Naomi's face turned pale instantly. No, Vanessa opened the file dramatically. Inside were fake statements claiming Naomi tried to extort money from wealthy restaurant guests using fabricated family stories. Marcus immediately frowned. These signatures are recent. Victor interrupted sharply. Poor people become creative when they smell inheritance. Crowd pressure exploded instantly. Several family members nodded coldly. One older uncle whispered loudly enough for Naomi to hear, she planned this from the beginning. Naomi's hand started trembling again. I never asked for your money. Vanessa leaned closer calmly. Then sign this statement admitting you lied. Naomi stared down at the paper. If she signed it, Jeremiah's treatment would restart immediately. If she refused, everything could collapse again. Emotional trap complete. Elijah watched silently from the far end of the table. Observing. Measuring every contradiction carefully. Why freeze hospital payments during a family investigation? He finally asked quietly. Vanessa's eyes hardened. Because fraud has consequences. Tiny hope flickered again when little Malik, the young busboy from the restaurant, suddenly appeared near the mansion doorway with Marcus. Nobody expected him there. Victor's face changed instantly. Malik nervously held an old flash drive in his hand. I found this hidden behind the restaurant office monitor. Naomi looked shocked. Marcus carefully took the drive. The original camera backup. Tiny emotional relief flashed across Naomi's face for 1 second. Then obstacle struck immediately again. Victor laughed suddenly. A child carrying random electronics proves nothing. Vanessa turned toward security. Remove them. Guards stepped closer instantly. Social pressure swallowed the room. Naomi looked around desperately. Nobody in the wealthy family defended her. Nobody except Elijah. But even Elijah had not spoken fully yet. Why? Because the final proof was still missing. Elijah slowly picked up the fake confession paper Vanessa prepared for Naomi. His eyes moved across the forged details carefully. Then he asked one sharp question. Why does this statement mention the necklace before the police report ever did? Silence. Victor looked toward Vanessa instantly. Small mistake. Dangerous mistake. Elijah noticed it immediately. So did Marcus. Tiny crack in the trap. But Vanessa recovered quickly. Enough distractions. Sign the paper. Naomi looked completely cornered now. Jeremiah's medicine. The pressure. The rich family staring. Her tears finally fell silently onto the unsigned page. I am tired, she whispered painfully. I just want my brother safe. Even Elijah's expression shifted hearing that. Then the final humiliation hit harder. Vanessa stood and addressed the family loudly. This woman entered our lives pretending to be a victim. Tomorrow morning she leaves this mansion forever. Several relatives nodded immediately. Naomi lowered her head completely. Near hopeless now. But at that exact moment, the massive dining hall doors slowly opened again. A hospital archivist walked inside carrying a sealed evidence box beside two legal investigators. Marcus stared in shock. Elijah slowly stood to his feet for the first time all night. The archivist lifted the sealed box carefully and said one sentence that froze the entire mansion. "We recovered the missing fire relocation records." The sealed evidence box sat in the center of the Brooks Mansion dining hall while every wealthy guest stared at it like it might explode. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed comfortably anymore. Naomi stood near the far end of the table still holding her torn bag tightly against her chest. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she remained standing. Quiet dignity. Elijah Brooks slowly stepped beside the evidence box while the hospital archivist handed him a legal authorization form. Vanessa Brooks kept her posture elegant, but her fingers trembled once before folding together again. Victor Hayes noticed it immediately. So did Marcus. The mansion dinner had transformed completely now. No longer a private family argument. Lawyers. Hospital investigators. Business partners. Relatives. Security guards. Everybody had gathered into one public room waiting for the truth to either destroy Naomi, or destroy somebody else. Elijah remained calm. Controlled. Dangerous in silence. "Nobody leaves until this archive is reviewed," he said quietly. Vanessa laughed softly. "You are humiliating your own family over a waitress." Naomi lowered her eyes instantly hearing that word again. Waitress. Poor girl. Disposable. But Elijah answered without looking at Vanessa. "Then why are you afraid of one waitress?" Emotional silence spread hard across the mansion hall. Tiny hope flickered again. Naomi noticed for the first time that some family members were beginning to doubt Vanessa now. One older aunt quietly whispered to another guest while staring at the necklace around Naomi's neck. Across the room, Malik stood nervously near Marcus holding the recovered flash drive against his chest like precious evidence. Victor noticed him immediately. That child should not even be here. Marcus stepped between them instantly. He stays. Tiny protection. Tiny emotional shift. Elijah carefully opened the evidence box but did not reveal its contents yet. Instead, he removed several old folders and placed them slowly across the long dining table. Burned edges. Missing signatures. Hospital relocation records. Wealthy guests leaned closer. Phones quietly started recording again. Vanessa immediately tried regaining control. Before anybody believes this circus, remember she entered this family using lies. Naomi finally lifted her head slightly. Hurt filled her voice, but so did exhaustion. "I never asked to come here." One family member looked uncomfortable hearing that. Another lowered his eyes. Public tension growing now. Then Elijah asked one sharp question that froze the room again. Why did father transfer money to St. Mercy Hospital 3 days after the fire? Vanessa's face hardened instantly. Victor interrupted quickly. Business donations happen every day. Elijah slowly slid a payment document across the table. This one was marked private settlement. Nobody spoke. Not even Victor this time. Emotional pressure climbed higher. The mansion lights reflected across the silver necklace still hanging around Naomi's neck. Elijah noticed it again. Memory pulling harder now. If you were inside that room at that moment, who would you believe? The poor waitress trembling beside the wall? Or the powerful family trying desperately to control the story? But before answers arrived, obstacle struck again. Vanessa suddenly stood up sharply. This investigation ends now. She pointed directly toward Naomi. That girl manipulated a dying woman and stole confidential hospital property. Gasps spread softly across the room. Naomi looked crushed instantly. No, Vanessa kept going colder now. She wants inheritance. Nothing more. Several guests started whispering again. Tiny hope collapsing halfway. Victor saw the shift and pressed harder. Poor people learn quickly when rich families feel guilty. Naomi's eyes filled again, but she refused to cry publicly now. That silence hurt more than tears. Elijah suddenly spoke again. Calm. Firm. Nobody speaks to her like that again. Complete silence followed immediately. Even the guard straightened. Quiet authority filled the room completely now. Tiny hope returned. Elijah then nodded toward Marcus. The mansion projector screen slowly lowered from the ceiling. Public stage fully prepared now. Malik carefully handed the flash drive to the hospital investigator with trembling hands. The original restaurant footage, he whispered. Vanessa's expression finally cracked for real. Just 1 second. Fear. Then control returned again. Edited videos prove nothing. Elijah looked directly at her this time. Then let everyone watch. Emotional tension exploded higher. Naomi stood frozen beside the table while wealthy relatives stared between her and the black screen waiting to light up. Marcus quietly placed one final document beside Elijah's hand. Elijah glanced at it once, and his entire expression changed subtly. Another missing piece finally found. But he still said nothing. Why? Because the final reveal needed witnesses. Needed silence. Needed everyone watching together. Tiny hope rose again when one elderly Brooks family member quietly pushed a chair toward Naomi instead of forcing her to stand. Small gesture. Huge emotional shift. Naomi hesitated before sitting carefully. For the first time all night, somebody treated her like a human being. Then obstacle hit one final time before truth. Vanessa stepped toward the projector controls suddenly. Nobody will watch fabricated lies in my father's home. Marcus moved instantly to block her path. Security guards shifted nervously. Family members started arguing softly now. Chaos almost breaking loose. But Elijah raised one hand. Silence returned immediately. He picked up the silver necklace from beside the evidence box and placed it carefully beside the projector remote where everyone could see it clearly now. Object clue. Family secret. Emotional proof. The entire mansion stared at it in silence. Then Elijah finally looked around the room slowly and said one sentence that made even Vanessa lose color. Before you judge her, watch this. The projector screen flickered alive. And the first frame of the hidden fire footage appeared. The hidden fire footage flickered across the giant mansion screen while every wealthy guest froze in silence. The blurry security video showed Naomi standing beside the back kitchen exit of the restaurant that night. Her faded waitress uniform was soaked from rain. She looked exhausted. Scared. Holding a small child against her chest. Then the video zoomed slightly. A silver necklace slipped from beneath Naomi's collar. The exact same necklace now resting beside Elijah's hand. A sharp breath escaped from one elderly Brooks family member instantly. That necklace, phones slowly lowered across the room. Nobody whispered anymore. The footage continued. Vanessa suddenly appeared on screen arguing with the restaurant manager near the emergency exit only minutes before the fire alarm started. Her face tightened immediately watching herself exposed publicly. This proves nothing, she snapped quickly. But Elijah did not even look at her. Quiet authority filled the room again. Keep watching. The next clip appeared. A hospital intake form dated 23 years earlier. St. Mercy Hospital. One newborn child transferred after an apartment fire. Patient guardian name intentionally blacked out. But the surname remained untouched. Brooks. Complete silence exploded across the mansion dining hall. Naomi looked confused now. Hurt. Shaking slightly. She whispered softly, "Why is that name there?" Nobody answered immediately. Emotional pressure crushed the room. Victor Hayes suddenly stood up aggressively. Those files were sealed. Elijah finally turned toward him slowly. Then why were you trying to destroy them? Gasps spread instantly. Vanessa stepped forward quickly. He is twisting everything. But before she could continue, the hospital archivist raised another document with trembling hands. This signature was forged. Public silence became terrifying now. The archivist pointed directly toward Vanessa. The transfer order removing the child from hospital protection was signed under your authority. Naomi's eyes widened slowly. What child? Nobody laughed at her anymore now. Nobody looked away from her poverty. Because the truth had entered the room already. Layer by layer. Evidence by evidence. Then Marcus walked toward the screen carrying the restored flash drive. There is more. The final restaurant footage appeared. This time clearer. Vanessa was seen speaking privately with the restaurant owner hours before Naomi was publicly humiliated and fired. The audio cracked slightly, but one sentence came through clearly. Make sure she leaves before Elijah sees her. Complete shock spread across the mansion. One wealthy guest covered her mouth. Another quietly sat down. Even the guards looked uncomfortable now. Naomi stood frozen. Silent tears rolled down her face. Not because she was weak anymore. Because for the first time, people believed her. Elijah looked directly at Vanessa. Calm. Cold. You knew who she was. Vanessa's voice cracked for the first time. I was protecting this family. By destroying hers. Elijah answered immediately. Sharp silence followed again. Then Malik slowly stepped forward clutching the old burned photograph recovered from Naomi's bag. His tiny hands trembled badly. My grandma said this belonged to my mother. He handed the photo toward Elijah. Elijah placed it beside Naomi's face carefully. The room froze again. Same eyes. Same birthmark near the collarbone barely visible in the picture. Same necklace. One elderly woman whispered through tears, she looks exactly like Celeste. Naomi looked confused hearing the name. Then the final document was opened. Elijah unfolded it carefully in front of everyone. A sealed birth transfer report. 1 page missing for years. But not tonight. The room watched him silently as he read aloud. Female child rescued after apartment fire, biological daughter connected to the Brooks estate. Vanessa stumbled backward instantly. Victor grabbed the edge of the table. Public truth fully cracked open now. Naomi could barely breathe anymore. What does that mean? She whispered. Elijah looked at her for a long second before answering softly. It means your life was stolen before you were old enough to remember it. Emotional silence swallowed the mansion whole. Some guests lowered their heads in shame. Others stared directly at Vanessa now with horror instead of respect. Vanessa tried speaking again desperately. She does not belong here. But this time nobody rushed to support her. Nobody. Then the oldest Brooks family lawyer slowly stood up holding another sealed envelope. His face looked pale. There is one final record, he said carefully. If this document is authentic, then Naomi is not only connected to this family. He swallowed hard before continuing. She may be the legal heir Elijah's father spent years searching for. Every eye turned toward Naomi instantly. Tears filled her eyes again as the entire reason for her ruined life finally began unfolding before her. Then Elijah slowly turned toward Vanessa and asked one final question she could not answer. How long have you known the real Naomi Brooks was still alive? Vanessa's face lost all color as the entire mansion stared directly at her. Nobody moved. Nobody defended her anymore. Elijah's final question still hung heavily in the air like judgment itself. How long have you known the real Naomi Brooks was still alive? Vanessa opened her mouth slowly, but no words came out. Her hands trembled beside the table. The same woman who mocked Naomi publicly only hours earlier now looked terrified in front of the same wealthy crowd that once worshipped her. Then the Brooks family lawyer stepped forward, carefully holding the final sealed records. The inheritance trust was altered 22 years ago, he announced clearly. Gasps spread instantly across the mansion hall. The original beneficiary listed here is Naomi Brooks. Complete silence crushed the room again. Naomi froze beside Malik. Tears slowly filled her eyes again. Not from shame this time. From shock. From pain. From finally understanding why her mother spent years hiding old papers inside broken boxes and praying nobody discovered the truth. Vanessa shook her head desperately. That girl knows nothing about this family. Elijah answered calmly. Because you made sure of it. Sharp silence followed immediately. One elderly Brooks aunt lowered her eyes in shame. Another guest quietly whispered, "We laughed at the rightful heir." Phones disappeared completely now. Nobody wanted to be seen mocking Naomi anymore. The same waitress they called poor trash was now standing in the center of a stolen family truth. Victor Hayes tried stepping forward. This can still be handled privately. Elijah finally raised his voice slightly for the first time all night. No, the room froze instantly. She was humiliated publicly. The truth will stand publicly too. Emotional pressure broke across the crowd. Naomi lowered her head, crying silently while holding Malik close against her chest. Malik looked up at her softly. "Mama, we are not bad people." Naomi could barely answer through tears. "No, baby." Elijah turned toward the family attorney again. "Restore every frozen account connected to Naomi Brooks immediately. Transfer medical coverage for her mother tonight." Vanessa's knees weakened instantly. "You cannot do this to me." Elijah looked directly at her with cold disappointment. "You already did it to yourself." Public shame spread visibly now. The same rich guests who once smiled beside Vanessa slowly stepped away from her. One board member removed his invitation badge quietly. Another family member refused to look at her anymore. The emotional collapse had already begun. Then the hospital archivist revealed one last detail. The fire 23 years ago was never accidental. Gasps erupted again. Vanessa panicked immediately. "That is a lie." But the archivist lifted the old camera still frame showing Victor Hayes entering the building minutes before the fire started. Nobody needed more explanation anymore. Victor looked trapped now. Exposed. Weak. The crowd no longer saw power when they looked at him. Only guilt. Naomi stared at the image silently. "My mother lost everything that night," she whispered painfully. Elijah stepped closer to her gently. "And you spent your entire life paying for crimes you never committed." Tears rolled freely down Naomi's face now. But she did not beg anymore. She did not lower herself anymore. For the first time in years, she stood with dignity instead of fear. Vanessa suddenly broke down completely. "I was trying to protect the family name." One elderly Brooks woman answered her sharply. "You destroyed it." Silence swallowed the room again. Then Elijah calmly removed the Brooks estate management ring from Victor's hand and placed it on the table. "Effective tonight, you no longer represent this family." Victor looked shattered instantly. The crowd watched quietly as decades of power disappeared without violence. Without screaming. Just truth. The final emotional blow came when the lawyer handed Naomi the restored birth certificate. Naomi Brooks. Official heir designation restored. Her hands shook violently holding the paper. Malik smiled softly through tears. "Mama, that is your real name." Naomi cried harder hearing it aloud for the first time. Elijah then looked toward the mansion entrance where rain still fell outside. "Prepare the east residence," he ordered calmly. And move Mrs. Carter to the private medical wing tonight. Naomi looked up immediately. Shock filled her exhausted eyes. Why are you helping us? Elijah paused for a long moment before answering quietly. Because your family should have been protected a long time ago. Emotional silence filled the mansion again. Then Elijah gently placed the restored family necklace back into Naomi's trembling hands. You do not have to fight for survival anymore. The massive mansion doors slowly opened behind them. Warm golden light spilled across the marble floor while Naomi stood frozen between the life that destroyed her and the life waiting beyond those doors. Then Elijah looked at her one final time and said softly, Naomi Brooks. You are finally home. Naomi stood frozen beneath the warm mansion lights while the massive doors slowly closed behind her. The words still echoed inside her chest. You are finally home. She held the restored birth certificate tightly against her heart with trembling hands. Malik leaned quietly against her side, staring at the marble staircase with wide eyes. Everything felt too big. Too clean. Too safe. After years of leaking ceilings, unpaid bills, crowded buses, and cold nights without enough food, silence itself felt unreal now. Elijah stayed beside her without pressure. Without pride. Just calm protection. Nobody will force you to stay, he said softly. Naomi looked down immediately. I do not know how to belong in a place like this. Elijah answered gently, you already belonged here before anyone stole that from you. Tears filled her eyes again. But these tears felt different. Not humiliation. Relief. Upstairs, doctors carefully moved Naomi's mother into a private recovery suite overlooking the garden. For the first time in years, her medicine sat untouched beside a full meal instead of an unpaid bill. Naomi walked slowly into the room carrying the old silver necklace that once felt like a burden. Her mother smiled weakly through tears when she saw her. You kept it safe, she whispered. Naomi nodded softly. I almost lost hope. Her mother touched Naomi's face gently. But you did not lose yourself. Emotional silence filled the room. Malik climbed carefully onto the hospital bed beside his grandmother. We have a big house now, he asked innocently. Naomi laughed softly through tears for the first time in the story. Small. Real. Human. Elijah quietly watched from the doorway without interrupting their moment. Days later, the Brooks estate officially restored Naomi's legal identity and inheritance rights. The same wealthy people who once ignored her now lowered their eyes respectfully when she walked past. Not because she suddenly wore expensive clothes. Not because she lived in the mansion. But because the truth finally stood louder than money. Vanessa and Victor disappeared from public leadership completely after the investigation became official. Nobody applauded them anymore. Nobody protected them anymore. Their power collapsed under the weight of their own lies. But Naomi never asked for revenge. She only asked for peace. Elijah made one final announcement during the family gathering inside the mansion dining hall. Every employee fired unfairly from Brooks Properties will be reviewed and reinstated if they choose to return. Several workers quietly cried hearing those words. Naomi looked at him with surprise. Elijah simply answered, a family name means nothing if it destroys innocent people. The old burned photograph that once hid inside Naomi's torn bag was finally placed inside a silver frame near the mansion fireplace. Beside it sat the restored necklace and the recovered hospital documents. Not as symbols of pain anymore. But proof that the truth survived. One evening, Naomi stood quietly on the mansion balcony watching Malik laugh freely in the garden below. No fear. No hunger. No tears hidden behind fake smiles. Elijah stepped beside her holding 2 cups of tea. He smiles more now, he said softly. Naomi nodded slowly. Children should not have to survive like adults. Elijah looked at her carefully for a moment. And adults should not have to beg for dignity. Their eyes met quietly. No grand romance. No dramatic promise. Just healing. Respect. Safety. The kind of love built slowly after pain. Naomi finally allowed herself to breathe without fear of losing everything overnight. Then her mother walked slowly onto the balcony wrapped in a warm blanket. Stronger now. Alive now. She smiled at Naomi proudly. Your father once said this family would destroy itself if it forgot kindness. Naomi looked back toward the mansion lights glowing softly behind them. The same place connected to years of suffering now slowly becoming a place of healing instead. Malik suddenly ran toward Naomi laughing loudly. Mama Brooks, he shouted proudly. Naomi froze hearing the name again. Her real name. Her true identity. Not hidden anymore. She knelt down and hugged him tightly while tears of relief rolled down her face one last time. Elijah quietly looked away to give them privacy. The wind moved gently across the balcony while the old necklace rested safely against Naomi's chest where it always belonged. And for the first time in her life, nobody looked at her like she was unwanted. Nobody called her poor trash. Nobody questioned her worth. Because the truth may be delayed, but it can never stay buried forever. Do not mock the poor because you do not know who they truly are. Do not judge people by worn clothes or trembling hands. Power built on lies will eventually collapse. And kindness, even from a poor construction worker who stopped to comfort a crying waitress one rainy night, can change an entire destiny.